See if this works. Hello and welcome to the Black Tower. I'm the Sorcerer Armana Soul. Coffee with the Sorcerer has been postponed for water with the Sorcerer because it's way too late to be drinking coffee. Tonight I have a really good friend and somebody I'd like to introduce each and every one of you to, Jon Vermilion.
Hello, glad to be here, man.
It's good to have you here, brother. So tonight we were sitting there chatting. We're like, we should do something on gnosis.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, we both have very similar gnosis, but it goes from almost two pathways. So it'd be interesting to dive in and see where it goes.
Well, when you hear the word gnosis, and then you're thinking of what you've read concerning it, sometimes they're not one and the same. You got anything you want to throw out there about that?
Well, my gnosis, like, I feel gnosis is more like revelations that come from not only just reading, but, just experience and, meditations and realizations throughout. And it's more of the understanding of the way, to me, the way the world works based on a spiritual level.
Right. So kind of like invisible understanding that just floats into the brain pan.
Correct. Yeah. For us all to assimilate and figure out, and many get lost within.
Right. Well, for gnosis over the years, I've relied on certain entities or masks or forces and so forth and so on. Like I like to work with Armin when it comes to things that I need to contend with and deal with to become, to stay on top of emotional stuff, repressed things, so forth and so on.
Sure.
And the knowledge that comes with that, I call that gnosis. What would you call it?
I mean, that is gnosis. I mean, it's self-realization through, what I would call purification, or transmutation. There's always a light and dark, of everything. In a religious aspect, people call it LHP or RHP for, the certain types of paths, but there's always a dualistic aspect to it. And when you take the dark side of it, everybody has a very dark side of it, and that's based on experience, whether it be this experience that we're all experiencing now or past experiences or, simultaneous experiences that are happening, because the soul is very vast. So when you transmute that dark, that is that gnosis. You're becoming more enlightened. That light's more pouring through you. That's that Lucifer current, or as I also would consider that Christ current, but spelled with a K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What about the future self? Because you can have gnosis about your future self.
It's funny because you bring up futures, because I don't know, because futures are never set in stone. It's like when I had my death experience when I was, younger, that whole life review that you hear people talk about, like, oh, my life flashed before my eyes and I seen everything. It wasn't so much like that. It was like seeing your whole life at one moment, but then seeing, like, let's say me and you shook hands one day, and we shook hands and we both had thoughts, and what if they were different thoughts, and you've seen all these different possibilities and future probabilities also off of what was, and you've seen all these outcomes and multidimensional differences of what could have been based off your choice and your actions and your thoughts. And coming back from that, it really made me realize that there is really no future self. It's just what you want to become. You can become it by, doing whatever you want to do, in a sense, as long as it's, whether it be your will or God's will.
Yeah. And the future being unwritten as of now, and what is now will soon be the past. So I follow the Yog-Sothoth style way of looking at all instances of periods.
Sure.
And so when I think of future gnosis, here's I guess what I actually mean by it when I refer to it that way, is that if the future is unwritten and we're still dreaming it, what happens is that when we're working with these powers, these forces, and when we're working along paths or traditions or anything like that, we are seeking ever so much to fully become who and what we truly are. And in that moment, gnosis is induced. And in that moment, you can also at the same time design the future you. And I guess that's kind of what I meant by
Sure.
future gnosis.
Yeah, I could follow that. Yeah. Because I mean, in my eyes, I think the future you already exists in many different areas, but becoming the best future you or the worst future you or you know
Oh,
the
and then you got to take into account parallel
and that kind
universe.
of goes to the higher self, the higher self, the lower self, and it goes through all these different self perspectives. Um, and I mean, I think we all, especially as like occultists or spiritualists, we want to strive to be our best in pretty much everything, whether that be your emotional status or physical status or whatever. There's always some strive to be the best at something.
Yeah. And, the other day, you and I, we were talking about death and dying.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about, we both had not what they call near death experiences, but we actually died.
Yeah.
And we were discussing this. And there have been a few people I've communicated with that, have also gone through, where they actually died and they were brought back and all this other stuff. And it's only been my experience uh, from just what I see and from what I pick up on and so forth and so on that these people who have these kind of experiences, they go through a more of a radical spiritual, physical, psychological transformation than most people
Yeah. Of course.
experience.
Mm-hmm.
And this in turn creates a sort of kind of like a new being. Uh, we do we want to touch on that? Do we want to like maybe?
I mean, I can touch on it based on my experience.
Well, let's do it.
I mean, I realize, you were younger when you were telling me that, and obviously, it's in your memory. It's just not maybe conscious. Mine's still conscious even after what I was 21, so what, almost 13 years, close to being 13 years. So it's still pretty conscious. But when I brought back that, there is a sense of a new being, but it's almost like this. It's the same being, but it's this new being that with a new understanding. It's almost like being reborn. And I think that's where a lot of like certain, religious philosophies, they do that whole born again or reborn because they're trying to birth that experience into somebody by not actually giving that experience. It's a ritual, it's a ritual experience that not a lot of people can connect to because it really can't be fate. It can't be created. It has to be experienced.
Yeah. Did you know that there are lots of ancient practices of and it was referred to at the time as death cults.
Mhm.
And it's not really they were death cults. They didn't go around killing people or nothing like that.
Yeah.
But a form of the initiation, and it's passed throughout the ages, and different traditions do it differently. But they would recreate a situation like they would bury them alive.
Hmm.
You know, seal them up in a sepulcher. All these different techniques so that they would undergo the psychological aspect.
Yeah, that actually, I have you can call it a past life, whatever, but it's a very deep memory, and I've only had it confirmed by a few people, and I've never really heard of it in any books. And if anybody out there knows a book, please tell me. I would love to read about it. But in my memory, I remember the original purpose of sarcophagus in Egypt was actually a ceremonial rite where the aspirant would lay inside of this, stone, tomb almost, and have this thing over it. And there's holes in the top, so you're not suffocating the person, but it creates like a deprivation tamer. I can't say that word too well.
Yeah.
But it takes away all your senses, it takes away everything from you, and you basically get forced into that experience. And what it was then in the mystery schools of Egypt was an initiation rite into the next level of learning. I remember this because I remember seeing it take place. I don't know. I don't know if I actually undergone it, but seeing it take place made me realize that I was in some kind of, into it at some form, but nonetheless, that memory has always stayed out to me. So it's those kind of things, re-experiencing that death experience. Nowadays you have DMT, which is widely practiced in a lot of shamanism and ayahuasca, which kind of replicates that. But it's still, it's already inside of you. You don't need to take a drug to do it.
Yeah. And and I think that that's a lot of things. Me personally, I would love to physically uh, be able to trust somebody or a group of people to like undergo these types of rites. I'll never forget when I was 7 years old. I heard of the Sundance. Man, they poke holes, drag you up on a pole,
Mhm.
and leave you for 2, 3 days tripping your bojangles off,
Oh.
and you have the
You
spiritual
learn.
immersion, and I'll never forget at 7 years old, I was like, I want to do that. And everybody thought I was crazy. They're like, those are hooks, they really cut you, all this other stuff. And I remember at 7, I may have understood that there was pain involved in everything. And maybe I didn't fully understand what the entire rite was about. But when I heard the concept that that's how they connected with the Great Spirit, I was like, I would so do that.
Yeah, I mean, and that there's a lot of fear of death. Like I think we discussed that. What was it yesterday? We discussed kind of like the whole fear of death. And I don't know why people are afraid of it. So many people have done it. It's a thing that happens, and that's why a lot of those aspects and that refining that current through the death experience is refined as black magic or death cults or more of that darker aspects of it. And it's because people put a lot of fear to it. And when you fear something, a lot of darker aspects come up, your regrets, your remorse that you may have lived in your life. All these things come up, and that's, not to sound biblical by any means, but, it's forgiveness of self and forgiveness of others is definitely the right through ascension of yourself anyway.
Yeah. I was a lot of my like when I was little, I was in a bad car accident. I don't remember anything. I don't remember a thing. Matter of fact, I remember when I came out of my coma that I had no knowledge what happened before. I
Sure.
don't remember being a mean little toddler. I don't remember the things. All I remember is from the moment I woke up in the hospital, on a flat bed where they would just tilt it forward and backward and stuff because I was paralyzed.
Yeah.
You know, and and I remember stuff like that, but I didn't remember anything before it. And over my lifetime, I've worked on regression. Trying to remember, and we were talking about this the other day that there were people who were like, oh, we remember what kind of kid you were, and you absolutely were not the same child afterward. And now some people, some skeptics would be like, well, yeah, because you got slowed down or whatever this other stuff. But then when you take into account what parents say when they know their children, it's a big difference in knowing, okay, they got the air knocked out of them, so they're not really into the fight, versus something that drastic change.
Right.
And so over the years, as I've worked through the death current, one of the things that I really, really, really had to embrace, and I wasn't sure how to do it, but I did it anyway, is I visualized all the ways that I could possibly die. And I immersed myself in those images and in those events, well, like being buried alive in an ant bed. I mean, just really, you're just the most painful, gruesome stuff you can think of to overcome your fear.
Correct. Yeah.
And it wasn't because I was afraid of dying. Mm-mm. Matter of fact, I've seen way too many people die that when I took up the mantle of sorcerer and was working and doing my thing, I had one goal in mind: how to live forever, how to be immortal. And I did everything in my power to learn how that could be possible, if that could be accomplished. And and part of that was to immerse myself into the death current because to learn, you know, what actually holds you back, what actually destroys you, what breaks you down, and so forth and so on, and then what will sustain you. And that goes into the death, rebirth, cycle.
Right.
And then after years, I had to kind of let it go because as I grew older, I got more mature about it. Then it wasn't necessarily about becoming a world famous, renowned necromancer who could raise the dead or keep you from dying, and all this other stuff. Then I truly became to understand what I was actually facing. It wasn't necessarily a fear of my own mortality, but the fear of losing those that I loved, because my fear was never for myself.
Right. And you know, something I've always taught was, you know, to detach from those kind of things, you know, and as you forgive others and forgive yourself and kind of go through certain visualizations on cutting those kind of attachments to those things, I feel that's what leads people to what I would consider like a real death experience at death, you
Yeah.
know, past preconceived notions of deities, past preconceived notions of seeing family members and all that kind of stuff, because I feel at that death, all those attachments come back to you to kind of either experience or, you know, re-experience or release, you know, and I feel that only through experience because of what I've seen in the whole grand spectrum of, you know, the life review, you know, because it was very vast. It was very vast and it was very almost breathtaking because you got to watch it all happen in a blink of an eye, but it felt like eternity. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
And it was like, when I was doing all these workings and everything, they induced a gnosis of sorts.
Hmm.
Everything from the feeling, from the experience to the emotions that came up,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
just thoughts that flooded my mind. And and the more in touch with the death currents I became, the stronger I became in it.
Hmm.
Uh, the strange thing was, and they never teach you this, is that when you connect to something, you need to learn to disconnect from
Yes.
it. I hate to say it, but like,
That's how attachments happen. Yeah.
you think of the Legend of the Vampires and stuff, and you think
If you
about,
get a magician listening right there, that is key. Like that is must detach.
yeah.
Yeah.
But you think about, how Hollywood does vampires and everything, and in the storyline, they're not supposed to drink the last drop of blood, else they fall into that death with the person. Uh, and it may seem cheesy, and it might sound stupid, but it actually fits in with the whole detaching. Uh, like, for example, I would not sit and just constantly channel a death spirit. I wouldn't sit and constantly channel a spirit of life and just blah blah blah, because we as living beings, we are constantly shifting spiritually, energetically. We are going through all these different faucets, and and it's one thing to find a need or a necessity to connect in on these energies, but then at the end of the day, we need to just step back from it and just let it go back to its thing, because we've just taken the time to sit and face it one at a time and deal with it independently like that than to keep staying at it, because I think that a lot of people get burnt out or actually lose focus the longer they're attached
Well,
to it.
well, the thing is, their energy body gets burnt out. You know, you can actually see it. You know, if you're clairvoyant enough, you can see it in the energy body of somebody getting burnt out, and you can tell whether it's be from normal physical, you know, stresses or mental aptitudes that they have, or you can see if it's from, you know, attachments and or demonic attachments or even angelic attachments. You know, like people think that angels are all, you know, love and light and whatnot, but it's not. You know, it's not all like that. And you know, it's people get too attached to that and they start, you know, even putting it out to other beings, you know, oh, it's the being doing it or it's the entity doing it. And really in the end, it's you doing it. It's your thoughts. It's, you know, it's really broken down into your left brain and your right brain
Yeah.
balance, you know, and, you know, that's part of my gnosis is, you know, you have your light gods and you have your dark gods and you have everything in between. And if you break that down into a physical perspective, you know, you have your right brain, you have your left brain, and you have your pineal gland, you know, or the third eye, as you know, it's occultly or esoterically, you know, dictated. And when you have, you know, let's say Lucifer or Christ or, you know, these light beings, you're more working with, you know, your conscious state of reality, your conscious self as God. And when you're working with this dark reality, this dark current, um, you're working with that creator energy of what has been and what is and what will ever be. It is that God energy. It is literally the void because, you know, from the void became light. That is, you know, technically spiritual fact. You can, you know, it's undercurrent of everything, you know, and
Yeah.
um, people need to look at that more. You know, it's not all about, you know, contacting beings and standing in a circle and, you know, calling upon other beings to come in and talk to you too. It's about doing the actual reflective work on yourself. And if people don't do that, they kind of get, in trouble. They can get in trouble, and eventually it can take on a form of schizophrenia where their energy body is so, fucked up that, their left and right brain so unbalanced that they're either way too logical and freaking out, or they're way too creative and skeptical to be even having a firm base in reality. So it's, you can protect yourself as much as you want, but if you don't do the work,
Right. I have a really good brother, friend of mine that I talk to a lot, and we both come from the same school of thought about the old ones, and he and I have discussed at great length, the connecting with that source, with that current, and and like how we were sitting here, we were discussing about how you attach and then you detach from it, so forth and so on. Well, there's been a constant theory in my mind that there is such a way to be able to enter into the current or the flow of it and not be attached to any of the beings, but to find yourself in that in within that current, to find yourself your own form that's likened unto them. And he and I discussed at great length the dangers of that. If you haven't built up to a certain level, if you're not used to the emanations that can come from it. And one day I was sitting there and I was working with my holy daemon, and I was sitting there and I was like, well, I need a way to be able to center the three spheres of the mind itself. And he gave me this really cool chant at the Narika chakra, which is at the base of your skull, Niash, and you vibrate it. The pineal gland that's in your brain, Tulu, third eye, Ara. So it's Niash, Tulu, Ara. And that sets for the that holds the mind steady for any of the workings that you would be doing. That involve energies that are of a higher vibration than what you're used to working with.
Sure.
I would use that chant before and after. Definitely not during, because you're not trying to break it up. You're just, because that can happen.
Yeah, you use it more as almost like an entrance.
Exactly. And there are tips and tricks that I think that there's a lot of occultists out there, a lot of practitioners, and we as a community, if we sit there and we're sharing this knowledge, we can have each other's back. We can honestly, I hate
That's,
to use the term,
that's,
but use it.
that's how it once was. Yeah, you're right. That's how it once was, like realistically, that's how it was once. Everything can work together, and the thing is, like I said, we come from kind of different paths, in a sense. Like I have a very specific practice. Like none of my specific practice I could really relate to any other book out there. If I read a book, I'm reading it based on appreciating somebody else's practice and somebody else's gnosis that got them to a mental and spiritual, ascended point to themselves. I find that interesting. So my practice, I mean, it's never really been one thing. It's been very specific, and it was kind of taught to me, I guess. It was not taught to me in the form of like you coming to me and talking and, we're sharing ideas. It came from more of like dreamtime scenarios or, visions. And it was very consistent and constant to a point where I thought I was kind of going through a weird psychosis and kind of falling in that, didn't know how to handle myself, and I was becoming very unbalanced. So when I put my stuff in my practice to use, it was never about doing any calls. It was never about doing any, toning in a sense, like what you were saying when you're toning the tones. It never had to do anything like that. It had more to do with tones as in like pitches, almost like a musical piano pitch.
Yeah.
And I would hear those tones go up and down and be able to feel them in the energy field. And, so I'd know if one was coming out, oh, I feel that like, kind of 3 feet from me almost, and hear it inside of me. And I only found one, the things that were dictated to me, it's, very specific. So it's something I'll be eventually teaching in, my book, but it is a version kind of like that. And when you shared that with me a long time ago, I told you I have something very similar, but what it is it tunes from down and it centers through the whole central chakra system, if you want to call it the chakra system. And it basically creates like a pathway. And eventually, when it's cleared, you start seeing silver, as in the visualization that we were doing earlier. You start seeing this silver current come down, and it actually starts to electrify the whole, physical system. After a while, you start seeing it in your, I don't know. I'm so flighty right now trying to explain this to you. I'm trying to like just show you a picture in my head, but the whole nervous system can ignite with that, and when you're ignited, your energy body takes on a different form, and that's how you start creating more of a power, a current within yourself.
I've done a lot of meditations. I've done a lot of visualizations, and I've done a lot of energy works and rituals and everything else. But like earlier when you were showing me that meditation, now at first it felt very calming and relaxing, and it felt natural to me.
Mm-hmm.
You give that 30 fucking minutes to kick the fuck in,
Oh yeah.
and literally you can literally feel the cells within your body renewing and sort of like they're changing just a little bit.
Yeah.
It is very strange. I will give it that, for the power in that is amazing.
And and the reason why I shared that with you, because I told you you have that draconian frequency to you, so that's why I was able to share that with you. And it's one of these things that the more you apply, if somebody is not aware of themselves and in tune with their emotions, or know, especially aggression or anger within themselves, it can bring up a lot of that. It's a very strong current. The more you use it, it starts to kind of affect your energy body quicker, because it's just symbols. There's nothing to it, specific colors, and it's direct to the point. And I've seen people get really angry from it. Sometimes even if I use it, I start getting a little bit more, I notice inside of me, I'm a little more snappy. I'm a little more aggressive, but I have control over it. I just notice that, especially other people, I start looking at other people like, oh, man. Like, oh, you're just,
I don't like you, but you're getting on my damn nerves, man.
right. And it can be little things, but as long as you know where you're at emotionally, and you know what you've been doing, especially using such techniques, you should know that you did do that and kind of know what to expect. Don't play with fire.
That's why I'm glad. It's been a long time since I've actually really put some effort into writing the book that I'm writing. I had to totally scratch my original idea for lots of reasons, and I had to step away from it. When I came back to it, I was like, I want to write this as a culmination of everything I've learned, of everything I've done, and where I'm coming from. Of how I did this, and trying to present it is often interesting, because you're not trying to make carbon copies of yourself out of your readers.
Right.
You're trying to show them the keys to self-empowerment, hoping like hell that, oh, well, I'm going to change up this wording here because these are the deities I work with best.
Right.
Stuff like that. And that's an important aspect of it. Now, how does all this tie into Gnosis? Because that's the point that we're making this video on. And I think that I like coming full circle on stuff, and I like going out there but tying it all in. I'm just crazy like that. But the Gnosis aspect of it, Gnosis isn't what somebody else can do for you. Gnosis isn't some entity communicating with you. Gnosis is a state of being that you have induced yourself by your desire and your will and your competency.
Correct.
Wow, do you actually agree with that?
Correct. I mean, that's true. If people realize their God self, and that's why one reason why a lot of people go to like the Luciferian perspective, or the more darker side of things, is because right away you're pretty much worshiping yourself as your own God, in a sense, or to becoming a God self. And that's true, especially for somebody, some people that have died, that have come back from that experience, they kind of know that, and it becomes that current within them. And, it's one of those things that no religions can really touch on.
Yeah.
That's why I think Gnosis is so up in the air with everything. We've had centuries and centuries and centuries of people trying to put everything together and, you know, come up with something and somehow to do it. And there is no right way. The only way that to do it is through yourself and the way that you feel is right, you know, to yourself at an emotional, physical, or mental level.
Yeah. And if it weren't for the imbalance that's out there in this world already, people would never be searching these directions.
Oh no.
You know, we teach about, you know, Jesus and death and judging yourself and looking harshly upon yourself and convincing yourself you're some evil, sinful bastard. And I remember when I was a
Shame on
little
you.
kid, I remember when I was a little kid at church, and they tried to tell me that we're all sinners and that Jesus died on the cross for our sins and that we killed him. And I sat there going, I didn't kill him. I wasn't even alive.
Right.
You know? And so at 5, 6 years old, I was getting annoying to my Sunday school teachers who were trying to, you know, push this shit on me. And I was just like, you know, it's like the story of Jonah and the whale. Seriously, a whale ate the dude. He's not coming back, okay? But
Right.
second off, if you think about it, in nature, I'm not saying a whale ain't swimming by and sees a dead body and won't swallow and eat it. I'm not saying it won't do that. But whales don't even attack people. What the hell?
Yeah.
You know? And so all these stories that made no sense, but these stories that were told over and fucking over, and then pressed and pushed, it caused a psychological imbalance upon this earth,
Oh, totally.
all its living inhabitants, that the only true reaction that the universe could have was to create its counterbalance, just to be able to straighten the shit out.
See, I think the duality happened kind of almost right away. You know, like right when, you know, I always explain that the void, you know, of course, when we talked, you know, when it became aware, it created an aspect outside of itself. It became aware of itself. So right away in creation, it created itself, you know, in consciousness.
Yep.
And that's what I call like Christ consciousness, not Christ consciousness. It is just God duplicated into a consciousness, you know, I am, if you want to call it that. And then from there, that consciousness level then becomes aware again, you know, because it duplicates what just happened, it creates again. And that's where what I would term the angelic hierarchy or Lucifer, because I term them to be one and the same, comes from. It's a direct carbon copy of that. And that's that light. That is the light of experience and the light of knowledge and the light of everything of being poured down into creation. And then it just, you know, topples down into creation, and it's all frequency, it's all vibration. And luckily, since we're vibrational beings, we can connect to all these levels of our own consciousness. I'm not saying somebody else's, you know, you contact Belial, you're contacting that energy with inside of you. You're not contacting Belial. I mean, you might be perceiving it that way, but you're contacting a current inside of you, whether you're contacting an angel, a demon, what have you, a jinn, whatever you're doing, you're contacting an energy that exists within inside consciousness.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that's the truest aspect of gnosis there is that you are the God and everything else, nothing is outside of you, everything's inside of you.
Yeah. Absolutely agree. I remember it was either back in the 80s or the 90s, I read a book where it said that the universe is musical.
Yeah.
It was based on a Greek school of thought concerning that. Now, a second interesting thing, and most people don't know this, and the few times I've told this to people, they either laugh their ass off thinking it's a joke, and I don't remember where I found this. I had been doing some research on it, and I had found out that Christed, or to be Christed, is it literally translates to smeared in semen, which is a which is a form of anointing. And now then you take into the account the pineal gland is oil. Are you catching me here?
Yes,
so,
yes,
like,
yes.
This whole thing just gets worse and worse. But when you look past all that, it all says the exact same thing, that we are having an experience which will awaken and enlighten us and bring us to higher vibrations and frequencies within. And when that happens within, it definitely shakes the world without.
Oh yeah. I mean, it starts with the mind. It starts with the mind, and for any viewers that aren't very well versed on what we were just talking about, if you want to look at it this way, your mind and your thoughts come first, your emotional comes second, and your physical comes third. And creation literally happens through that. You have a thought, you have an idea, just like God becoming aware of itself.
Yeah.
You have that thought, it becomes aware of itself, it becomes an experience through emotion, and then becomes a physical reality. This is how diseases are created. This is how anything is created, whether you get in a car accident or you bring these things vibrational to you based on the vibrations that you're sending out and rippling into your DNA, your etheric body itself.
You know, there are lots of people out there back about 4 or 5 months ago that started with the whole reprogram your DNA and all this other stuff.
12 strands. There's
I don't
12 strands.
around on that, but I do not in any way, shape, form, or fashion. But I will say this: it's more than that. And whereas in the magical community, I know that some people have to sell their products, or they're finding their little niche and how they can present it and so forth and so on. But there is honestly a truth there. There is a gnosis to be attained through that. Like in that exercise you led me through. I take it you're going to be presenting that in your book, I hope.
Yeah, yes. That and the extension of it.
Yeah. Well, I don't want to give away any hints or anything like that.
Oh,
You
it's
know,
fine.
when it comes closer to that time, you actually get to that point, good and damn well, I'm gonna be spamming that shit everywhere.
Hey, man, likewise. On your part, not just my part, but on your
Yeah,
part.
I was it's so hard sometimes to explain to people who like you have your person and they'll think surface thoughts, and then you have some people they're cunning, they're sly like serpents and shit.
Yeah.
They learn the art of stealth and sneakery, and then you have the deeper thinkers, the ones who aren't necessarily shallow thinkers. Actually, that goes over their head. Stealth is is below them, not because they think they're better, but because they're too intrinsically focused on just being utterly what they are. And
Yeah.
they're the deeper thinkers. They're the ones that are actually, paving the way, so to speak. Uh, and there is no vibration or level like that that's more important than the other because it's all one and the same. It's just varying degrees of it.
Yeah.
Uh,
I
but
mean, all paths lead back.
right,
All paths lead back home. Now, the only thing that doesn't lead you home is attachments. And every single practice, whether it be Voodoo, whether it be, Luciferianism or Satanism or any form of practice, whether it be even Christianity or, Islam, there's a certain practice there's certain people that pick up on the underlying principles.
yeah,
And when you get that, you understand a lot more. And there's like we what we said. What did you say? Like for the eyes to see and all that kind of stuff, or whatever you said.
yeah.
I want to
Ears
sound a
to
bit more.
hear, let those ears to hear, and those with eyes to see.
Yeah, and it's very true. And I think that has a lot to come with just soul advancement in general. All of us are here to advance in some way, shape, or form. And a lot of people get stuck in the drive of, woe is me, I'm a victim, I did this, this happened to me, wah, wah, wah. And, a lot of people that end up in those kind of mind patterns may shift into, let's say, black magic and kind of, fuck themselves up. Or they might become extremely programmed in a right hand path where they're giving themselves uncontrollably to others. It starts with that. Your religion and your spirituality starts with what you see in the mirror.
Yes, it is. I remembered back in the day when I was looking at the concepts of right hand, left hand, and all this other stuff. I remember looking at it and I just kept thinking they're all wrong. And and maybe it was young, maybe to a small part it was ego. I know it was at that age. But as I grew older, I realized I still felt the same way. They're wrong. And and here's why. Okay, on the right hand for them, all is light, all is not light.
Hmm.
Light was born of darkness and vice versa, and darkness holds light, and so forth and so on. The brightest light casts the longest shadow, and all that. Um, there is a place for death and decay, for destruction, for all this stuff. It is an order. It is a cosmic cycle, you know. And then I would look at the left hand, and I'd be like, and they want to bash the other side. There's this complete war between the two, and I'm sitting there going, geez, you ain't got to be best friends, and you don't have to like each other, but you have to realize that both of you are the exact same being. You're just at war with yourself when you separate it.
And that's where do you think all our wars on our planet come from? You know, there's a lot of people that want to pinpoint, you know, oh, it's just aliens. The aliens are screwing up things, or the ETs, or you know, this cult or this secret societies. Who cares? Like, even if that is the truth, and you know, I have a firm belief in some of that. It's it still starts with the individual that's doing those things.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a group thing. It all reflects the individual thing, and it's funny because all the hate amongst the two sides,
Yeah.
and unfortunately that's kind of what keeps balance. If you
You know, I'm glad you said that because there was a time about 10 years ago when I really got fed up with the entire cult community in general because I was like where the hell is all this division and shit coming from? You're a part of the occult community. You are a community. You know,
Yeah.
and so you need to let go of your differences. You can be different, but we're all still we're a huge body, so to speak. And in that sense, I'd always get so angry because like I couldn't understand, why is there got to be this and why is there got to be that. I understood on a certain level that it has to do with balance. I did know that, but at the same time, I was heartbroken at the necessity for it to have to be divided to balance anything out.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you think, what if the entire world was balanced? Do you know what would happen? Nothing. Not a damn thing would happen. Opposition causes growth.
You know, and it's funny because there's kind of like this little saying that's thrown out, especially in the new age community, that you know, love and light always wins, and you know, the higher in frequency you go, all you see is love and light, love and light. The thing is, there's always that duality. There's always a higher vibration of dark. There's always a higher vibration of some color. You know, and this is when we go into shades within visualization, even. You know, when you're visualizing things, color specific, colors of frequency. You know, if you're not visualizing purple right, you might not be tapping into the right frequency and so forth, you know, and that's kind of there's always a higher vibration of something, there's always a lower vibration of something. And it still goes back to that whole there's always a demonic and an angelic counterpart.
uh, I have to say this because you brought that up. I used to get a kick out of the New Agers. That would be that enlightened guru stuff, and and I love Wiccans in general. I fucking love them. I love that love and life thing.
It's great. It's a
I
great
am not
stuff.
built like that.
Right.
I'm a warrior, not a pacifist. Wow, what the fuck, But anyway, that is part of what I'm about to say though. But I used to laugh at these new agers because they'd be like, all zen and shit, and their whole life, and these crystals everywhere, even in their cars going down the road, I'd be like, okay, great and dandy. Give it 2 to 3 months, they would have a mental breakdown, a meltdown, something, and they'd be like, "Oh my chakras are out of tune," and all this, that, and the
Yeah.
other. And I would sit there going, no, you dumbass, you're out of tune because you are
Right.
both frequencies, not just one. What are you trying to do? Kill yourself?
Right. Right. And they deny an aspect of themselves, you know, and like I said, even in the ET community, you have people that are like, oh, you know, the reptilians and the draconians, they're negative and blah blah blah. Humans are made from reptilian genetics. Like we have a reptilian brainstem. Like this is proven. Our complex brain is a reptilian brainstem. You can see it in utero while we're forming. You can see us take form of a lizard first. Why is that? It's DNA. It's encoded in there. So we are all a reptilian draconian thing, and people try to push that away. They try to push those dark aspects away and live in that love and light vibration, all you're doing is lying to yourself.
Well, I'm
You
gonna be
know,
honest with you. I don't really.
you're ignoring an aspect of yourself, and that's not a good thing. You're gonna throw yourself extremely out of balance.
Yeah. Well, let me go back and correct something I said real quick before I approach that one. I don't mean that if you're a New Ager, you're a dumbass. I'm just saying
Oh
people
no,
that deny that other half of themselves. That's pretty dumbass. I don't know what else to call it.
no,
But
there's
back
yeah, that's exactly
because
it.
I'm not trying. I'm not here to offend anyone, but I do speak my mind and what I feel and I think without being reproachful for it.
No
Uh,
sugarcoating. It's not all love and light. Remember?
it's it's really not, but I try to be respectful. Uh, but on the thing about reptilians and all that, I honestly that is something I don't know anything about.
Mhm.
I didn't research that. I didn't study that. I don't know anything about that. What I do know, as far as what I'm aware of, is like you sat there and said more about it than I know. Now, what I know about the reptilian mind, the reptilian part of the brain, is the fact that you have to think that there is something that was developed before we ever grew intelligence. And it was reactionary at first. At first, it was, you sense danger, you flee, so forth and so on, all these different instincts. And so the reptilian brain is a home of instincts. Well, a few years back, I'd done some meditation on it, and I was sitting there and I was going, what kind of instinct had to be made into a child to be scared of the dark or to be scared of something underneath the bed when it wasn't, first off, when it wasn't taught to them, when they weren't exposed to anything like that, because you can have the most careful parent, and it is still inherent in a child to be afraid of things. What causes that? And in my occult studies, when I was working through things, and I started working with the old ones, I went to realizing that they are actually well connected to the reptilian mind. They're where those original emotions stem from. They're the primal well,
Correct.
um, which you and I have
Well,
discussed at length about.
well, when I'm
But
like talking about like reptilians and stuff, I'm talking about, if you want to categorize it, aliens or interdimensional beings or what have you, you can throw a name on it. It's, I mean, it is old, ancient people or beings that have been on this planet and other planets and been all over the universe. They talk about, I mean, Sumerian gods, they were, a reptilian-esque. Quetzalcoatl for the Mayans, it was a feathered bird, serpent bird. All these serpent beings and all these, not only is it symbolic to Kundalini and, the actual brain of a human being, but there are beings that do inhabit these qualities. Now, I mean, are you going to see one walking down the street? Probably not, because most people don't have the clairvoyance to be able to see that.
well, let's touch on that for just 1 minute,
Mhm.
because you just said the word.
Mhm.
Because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of people sitting here going, he believes in aliens and all this other stuff, and I don't feel as if it should be justified that simply and easily and dismissed.
No, it's not.
Uh,
No.
Understand the concept of like what you're talking about, like you just said, clairsentience. What did you see mentally? What can you visualize? Uh, so like, there's never been any bones or fossils of some serpent with wings that I'm
Right.
aware of.
Yeah, that we're told of. Who
Yeah,
knows?
right. And if they
It's
are, who the hell
speculation.
knows? Well, let's touch on something real quick for just a minute. So what you're saying is that these things were in the mind, they were viewed through the mind's eye, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, can you go just a little bit more into that? I mean,
Well,
how?
it goes back on the whole vibrational creation of the way the planes work, the vibrational planes of consciousness work, yes, we're only one being really experiencing itself, but their separateness, obviously you're Waylon, I'm John.
Yeah.
Uh, so there are other beings. But sometimes they're vibrationally existing on a different plane that your physical body might not be, aware of. So
Yeah.
then you have to tune into those inner planes. When you can disassociate yourself with what you're physically seeing compared to what you're mentally seeing, that's the third eye. Everybody's third eye is open. Everybody does daydream. Everybody does visualize. They do these things. They do them unconsciously. When you're aware of it consciously of what you're seeing, you start becoming aware of those thinner veils. And if you're vibrating, let's say, at a lower vibration, you might see those lower vibrational entities that are more negative or more, wanting to take hold of you. And again, it goes back to, if you are experiencing those things, it's you because you're vibrating at that level. But again, it goes to that clairvoyance to see it, and it takes that separation between physical sight and spiritual sight.
Hell yeah. Well, because you just making me think. I mean, that's really neat. I ain't honestly, normally I don't give stuff of that nature much of my space in my head because I don't disagree, but I don't agree. I'm neutral as fuck about it. But the way you're describing that, I can totally dig that. But I do have a question.
Mhm.
Okay, so let's say all these people believe in Quetzalcoatl, feathered serpent,
Right.
and so forth and so on, and then these aliens and all this other stuff, all these other beings and things, and then they could see them in their mind's eye. Could there have been an opportunity or a time when only some of them saw them one way and another saw them as another way, and so forth and so on?
Totally. And that's where I think a lot of problems happen. You know what I mean?
So you think that that's where the disagreements in on these subjects come from?
Right. I think there's, in my beliefs at one point where the spiritual war happened there was, two types of beings. There were reptilian and mammalian. You had reptilian type of beings and you had mammalian type of beings, and all on different vibrational frequencies. And if you look at human genetics, we have reptilian mammalian genetics. And we're like really the only species that is unique that way. A cow doesn't have the same genetics as us. We can use some things from a pig, and pigs are kind of, it makes me wonder why we can use organs from a pig and skin from a pig, and the Jewish religion, it's not kosher and stuff like that. And it makes me feel it's almost like a form of cannibalism because they're too much like us or created by us in some form. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I got you.
Who knows? Atlantis was doing some things. Who knows?
You're right. Like, for example, I never believed in Atlantis or, any of that stuff. And I think it was about a year and a half ago, something like that. I was doing a guided meditation on Atlantis. And I'm sitting there like, yeah, right. And I'm thinking somebody's created a mind structure in a guided meditation. They're trying to create it. I'm hard headed and I'm the master of my own mind. Next thing I know, I'm on this side of this huge ass bridge with this big ass city, and I'm sitting there going, "Holy shit!" I'm like, "Wow, what the crap?" And because I wanted to know about the Fomorians and all this other stuff, and I wanted to learn how it tied in with Teple. What is that name of that place? I don't know. Something Teple.
I can't recall.
Well, I can't either. That's the scary thing. But anyway, so I was trying to understand this the best way I could because I do know that meditation is different layers and levels. And I was realizing that if there is something in this universe that could exist, it does exist. It just exists elsewhere beyond our own comprehension, our own sight.
If you can think it's existing somewhere vibrationally. I mean, quantum physics is now touching on that over the past few years. I mean, really, quantum physics should replace science as a whole.
Oh yeah.
Really start going on those quantum levels because, you've got dark matter, you got subatomic particles. All this is happening. All this is consciousness. We're so, you got, a wooden table, what's creating that? God is creating that, and energy is creating that at a very molecular structure. It is creating that through consciousness. Yeah. And, it's funny because, my old workshops that I used to do, I tried to split people's vision of that physical world and that spiritual world by saying, okay, you're looking outside of yourself, and I bring them into seeing everything in the room. I'm like, you're seeing space time. I was like, you were seeing linear time in space. And then I'd have them close their eyes and they all kind of settled into themselves. All I'd say is time space.
Oh, yeah. That cube thing you and I were talking about the other day?
And when you kind of flip into that, you kind of, I'm not saying you're totally in time space by saying that, but on a scientific perspective, when you close out that outside world, that's just the first layer of meditation.
Yeah.
you know, and it keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then you start realizing that just a thought away, you can start astral projecting or bilocating if you know how to you harness enough energy in your consciousness to be able to do so. And slowly people are waking up to these things, thankfully.
Yeah, right. You know, I'm glad that you came on here and did this with me, and I'm not gonna lie. You make probably one of the only people that I'll sit there and listen to you all day long on
Thank you.
your theories on that. And here's why. First off, you're a balanced individual. Second off, you're apparently very knowledgeable. Third off, you're not going outside of the bounds, not necessarily of past left brain logic, but but you do keep it within bounds of reason, but
Thank you.
at the same time presenting the what if.
Yeah, I mean, I through all my experiences, I could write books and books and books based off, experiences that I've had. And I just try to take away knowledge from it. If somebody doesn't, jive with it or they don't vibrate to it, that's fine. Maybe they're not ready for their mind to be opened into that vibration. Maybe not. And I'm not gonna, if you infringe on anybody's growth in any way, shape, or form, I mean, you're technically infringing their karma in some way, shape, or form, depending on their growth. And so I would never want somebody to be like, oh, that guy, he knows everything. I'm going to follow him. Everything. You know what I mean? I only know based on experience, and I have my own center.
I've seen very weird things in my life that I swear I can't blame that shit on my subconscious.
Right.
And I can't blame that shit on being extremely open minded. I can just only explain it as a what the fuck moment.
Yes.
Like I saw this one being one time, I'll never forget. I was working in a chicken house, and I was probably 17. I was working in a chicken house. We're going down through there gathering chicken eggs, all this other stuff. Well, the back of the thing, chickens started acting stupid and jumping out of their cages. And I kept thinking, there's a snake or, there's something, And all of a sudden I got the willies. And I was like, what the fuck? And I turned around to look back there. There's this thing about 3 foot tall that looks like nothing but arms and legs, just thin, like a pole. And its body is a face and a mouth. And he just does like this right here. Man, dude, I swear I dropped the shit and ran the fuck out of here.
Sure.
I was like, you can have it.
Chupacabra. No, just.
People are like, what kind of drugs were you on? I'm like, absolutely none.
Right?
Yeah. And stuff like that. And I've had a few people over the years, oh, that was a brownie, or there's this, or is that, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what? You put it in a box all you want, but there's shit out there that you cannot fucking explain or stick in a box.
Right. And it's very true. I mean, that's why there's so many, mysteries. I mean, we still have mysteries on this planet that, the pyramids, the, Machu Picchu or whatever it's called, all these crazy buildings and all these things, they're still mysteries. People don't know. They have speculations and boxes they put everything in. And it's, when you see things like that, have you ever seen anything like that again?
Yeah, right.
Right.
Like they existed for a set amount of time and then there's no more. It's like, well,
right.
What happened before or in between? What happened?
Right.
Yeah, and nobody can explain any of it.
Right. And I think that, it has to do with vibration. Did anybody else see the little chicken being, the chicken coop being that you were with? Did anybody else see that?
Nope.
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 Seeing that?
But it was real as shit to me, and I ran the hell out of there. It could have the chicken house. I didn't care.
Yeah. See, I just think sometimes people see things like that are on that vibrational wavelength. They're just kind of going into those dimensions to see it, and I remember the first time, I'll share the story, it's kind of interesting. After my death experience, and this is a few months, and I'm, during this whole time, I'm trying to take in everything and just, I didn't tell nobody, I didn't tell some of my best friends. I was just tried to be me, even though it was a little different, you know what I mean? At least me to the best of my knowledge. And I was hanging out with a friend who was in the military, and he was telling me all this military shit that he was doing, and he was kind of hating it and regretting it. And while I'm listening to him, I had that separation of physical reality and inner reality again. Yeah. And I hear him talking, it kind of becomes, like Charlie Brownish, like, wah, 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 and I feel this rod of energy just come down right into the top of my head. And if you know anything about acupuncture, it happens right at the DU20 point. Yeah. And it comes in and it just ignited the inside of my head. Like it just extreme pressure. Clear as day, I hear telepathy is very real and this is how it works. And for the next 5 minutes, I was dictating on how telepathy works on a vibrational and telepathic centers and which centers it actually relates to and the vibrational currents of the mind and how it relates. And coming out of it, I'm like, yeah, man, the military. Yeah, you know,
meanwhile, your buddy's still talking.
You know, and it's these weird things. You know, some people, even in the same room as you, may not even experience the same things that you experience.
Yeah.
And so we all have our own realities, but there's really only one actuality. You know.
You know, I've had similar experiences like that where someone's talking, I hear them, but all of a sudden it's like they were the background noise, and all of a sudden I'm projected elsewhere, seeing and hearing things.
Right.
And it's being explained to me, just like someone actually talking to you, just like, okay, what you do is this. And I'm sitting there going, okay. And then we come back and the person's sitting there looking at me, it's like, where did you go? It's like, I didn't go anywhere. Did I disappear? No, I was
right. Oh, where did you
listening to you. What did I say? I have no idea.
Where'd your energy go? You know, where'd your subconscious go? And
yeah.
You know, it's so cool. That's one thing that fascinates me the most. And you know, I've tried to draw it in diagrams, and I've tried to explain it, and I try to explain it the best I can in my book of like how the astral levels are always constantly pertaining to your physical life. Your consciousness is so vast, and just because you're having this experience, just because me and you are talking right now, and you know, eventually somebody's going to be watching this or what have you, doesn't mean that there's a part of their consciousness that is not somewhere else, doing something, and they're not aware of it. You know, and sometimes you can become aware of those things.
Oh yeah.
You know, and that's can you know, of course, create imbalances in people too.
Yeah. And, and we're going to try and close it out right about here if we can. The most important thing that I would say to anybody who seeks gnosis or who uses it or, even just normal practice and living, find your balance, find your center. And no matter how far out you stray, come back to it. Have you got any last minute advice?
That about sums it very well. Very well. Just always keep the same mantra, you know, I am God. You know, you are a God. So if you're not in alignment with that, you're becoming less than what you could be. And that goes from a spiritual level to a physical level to absolute. If you're working in ceremonial magic or invocations, you need to stand your own as a supreme God.
Well said, man. Well said. Well, we're going to go ahead and close it out here. Jon, thank you very much for being here, man. Seriously.
Yeah, thank you, man. It was fun. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. And to each of you viewers out there, peace, blessings, and power. Till next time.